This podcast is supported by listeners like you. We're grateful for your tax-deductible donation at newthoughtphilly.org or the link in the episode description.
A practical prayer is a prayer that works.
These discussions between Reverend Bill Marcioni and Carol Lawrence dive into the details of how it works and how to work it.
Reverend Bill is a New Thought minister and the author of Practical Prayer for Real Results.
Your new life begins with a new thought.
Carol Lawrence is on a spiritual quest, finding the New Thought teaching after decades on the pulpit in 3 different traditional denominations.
I've got some questions.
Together, they're exploring the philosophy and activities that come together from many of the world's religions to create the practical spirituality that is New Thought.
Welcome to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marcioni.
Looking forward to another fun and inspiring and insightful and hopefully not too confusing conversation.
You're quite optimistic, aren't you?
Well, it could happen. It could happen. So you have been coming across the notion of oneness, which is pretty simple, and then duality, which is kind of what the oneness is not dealing with, and then there's non-duality, and it's brought up some a little doggy head tilt for you, huh?
Yeah.
So,
well,
explain what it is.
First of all, let me just say that oneness is not pretty simple. It's not simple. It's a lot. I think it's a heavy lift if you're coming from another, tradition.
Right.
Way of thinking. But you can get it. Okay, you can get it. But this duality thing, I'm not sure. You said in the intro or backstage or whatever, you said oneness versus non-duality.
Right.
And I said, isn't that the same thing?
And it is.
It is the same thing. But what about duality? And I'm okay, so go for it.
So if there's oneness and non-duality, where did duality come from?
Yeah.
Okay. There's this incredibly sophisticated magic trick going on. And I spent some time as a magician. And the interesting thing in magic tricks is that sometimes there's a gimmick, which is a little device or something that the magician has that keeps the audience member from seeing something. And a gimmick is never seen by the audience. There's something else called a fake, which is something that is seen by the audience but not understood. Mm-hmm. So they're looking at the thing that's hiding something and thinking that it's something else. Those all depend on us perceiving whatever's going on in a particular way. Mm-hmm. Like I can hold something in my hand and stand in such a way that my hand is just naturally blocked by my body, and you'll never see that I'm holding something. Mm-hmm. And that makes perfect sense. The incredibly complex magic trick that's going on is that we have our entire sensory system. We have 5 senses. Plus everything we think we know. So that's kind of the 6th one. So, sight, sound, taste, touch, smell. And the magic trick is that we think that's all there is. Mm. We think that what's coming in through our senses is giving us the real story. And in fact, it's not. It is very easy to hide stuff from us. The electromagnetic spectrum starts out with sound, way low frequencies and ground shaking. And then it goes and skips a whole bunch before we get into the part where we can see it. You can hide lots of stuff in between the sound frequencies and light frequencies. And we never think of that. Mm-hmm. We never think of that. That's, the radio waves happen there. And then beyond that, there's more of them. There's radiation that we get into that we also can't see or touch or taste or smell or otherwise know about unless the instruments are telling us about it. So everything that we're perceiving is through this very limited peephole. So it looks like duality. The illusion is that it looks like duality. In fact, there's no such thing as duality. There is oneness. There are different ways that the oneness is expressing itself. So something can happen and you can say, well, that's good. And something else can happen. You say, well, that's bad. It was just a thing happening. The good or bad happened in your mind. Now, you can get a whole bunch of people together and we can all agree, oh, that was bad. Which means we're all judging the thing that happened in the same way, which makes us think that the thing is actually good or bad. It's just a thing. So the oneness is, or the non-duality is, it's a thing. And the duality is us cataloging it, evaluating it, defining it, describing it, grading it, judging it.
So what you're saying is duality comes about based on how you view something. We're all looking at the same thing, but the point of view is what makes us think it's different. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
That's it?
Yes, at the end of the episode.
That's it?
Yeah.
No wonder you said to me backstage, you're overthinking it, because I absolutely was. I could get that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I go back to a story when I was trying to find my way home. I'm night blind, so I'm trying to find my way home to the new neighborhood in which I was lost anyway. And I was sitting outside looking at what I thought was a different view of something, tired, frustrated, and just looking at this house with all these beautiful Christmas lights, not realizing it was my landmark that I used to tell me how close I was to getting home, but I was on the side of the house instead of the front of the house.
Mm-hmm.
It was still the same house.
Right. You're just looking at it differently. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So it's how you're looking at it. So indeed, another example, which has got a little more drama to it, is the the fighter plane comes in low over the residential neighborhood and lets loose a couple of missiles and blows up a residential house. So if you're looking at that situation and it's your neighborhood and it's your neighbors, that's bad. That's a really bad thing. Looking at the same circumstance and you understand that the terrorists are in there and they're planning to blow up the entire city and they're now being stopped by the same activity, then suddenly cheering on the guy flying the airplane and everybody who figured out that that's what to do. Too bad about the house. But it changes from a really bad thing to a good thing, and nothing changes about the circumstance or the situation. Non-duality is, that's the thing. Okay. Do I want houses in my neighborhood being blown up by aircraft? No. And I live in Philadelphia, which is the only city where that's ever actually happened. But we're not going to get into that conversation either.
No, we're not.
So when we're talking about oneness and duality and non-duality, the duality is the judgment that we have about things being good or bad, hot or cold, up or down, in or out. It's all a matter of how we look at it.
So it's not a bad thing, actually, though, because it gives you perspective, right?
Exactly. It is very. I can look at something and tell you whether that's to my preference or not.
Mm-hmm.
We're creative beings, and we're part of a creative process that's creating this next experience or expression of the infinite. The term that we use is co-creating. In the beginning there was an and void and God began creating and sharing itself, because that's all it had as its creation. And then depending on your story, 6,000 years or 14.2 billion years later, here we are. Mm-hmm. And we're all still that one. So the mind that we're thinking with is the same mind that started. It's not like it grew out of nothing. All of the substance that exists anywhere. Science tells us that energy and matter can be converted, but neither can be created. You can convert energy to matter, matter to energy, but there's always going to be the fixed amount, which is the same amount that was there at the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So we are all part of that one. So what's happening is the one is revealing itself in new ways, and we're participating in that creative process. The creative law is responding to consciousness the way it did since the beginning of time. It's responding to ours. Mm-hmm. So when you see something or experience something or understand something, and it makes you desire the next cycle of creation to either include more of that or include something instead of that, we're participating in the creative process. So it's our observation and our ability to have our own perspective that lets us fine-tune and nuance the way that life is unfolding.
So you introduced the co-creative process in a larger perspective.
Mm-hmm.
When you say that we are, if I desire something, I am contributing to the co-creative process of the universe in a sense.
Oh, yeah.
In time, whatever. So yeah, that's pretty big. Although and it makes sense. It makes sense. Although I think that when you say co-creation, we think of it in a much narrower perspective.
Like we're just co-creating our lives?
Our lives, yeah. But, when you take it further, that pebble in the ocean, that pebble in the pond kind of thing, it's a ripple effect.
Yeah.
So while it is our own world that we are co-creating, it's beyond that, which is thoroughly amazing. That's just, and you have no idea.
There's one creation. Is it possible that the thoughts and intentions and desires and affirmations that I do this afternoon are creating some change in the experience of life on a distant planet in a far distant galaxy? It's possible. I don't know. Unlikely. It seems to be a localized phenomenon, but we know very little about life beyond what we're able to see with our five senses here on Earth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know?
But it forces us to have a larger view of possibilities. And one of the things that I never, ever put together this term, infinite possibilities. I never put that together because, it's just, I'm just a product of where I came from.
Mm-hmm.
The world that I came from was not big. So, it just wasn't, listen, it's easier to control your girl children if you keep them in a small world. That's just, that's just a given.
It's easier to control anybody if you keep them in a small world.
Yeah, but I know about my situation, and so I know being in and then I start peeping over, thinking, well, wait a minute now, there's more to this than I know, that I've been told. So yeah, it's a bigger world. I remember there was an experience that I had when early on, when in my call to ministry or my response to the call to ministry, it was a no back in those days. Women don't do that. That whole thing. Mm-hmm. And I'm just trying to do what I think is the right thing, right? Fishing out the way to make it work. I'm not protesting anything. I'm not trying to do anything. I'm just trying to find an open door. Thought I had. And me and two other women. And so we thought we had this pastor who was with us. And we showed up that night going through the whole process, and we were so careful to make sure we didn't step on anybody's toes, blah, blah, blah. And we get there, and that pastor that night, he knew he wasn't going to support us. He waited until we got there, and the church full of people, and he made this big speech, essentially, degrading us to the hilt. Okay, fast forward. Of course, we felt like you know what.
Mhm.
Fast forward. I'm walking out of this church thinking, please just let me get it. That was the longest aisle there ever was, right? And I'm trying, like, God, just please let me get out before anybody sees the tears that are trying to well up in my eyes. And I got outside, I looked at the sign, and I'm not going to say what the street was because people know the church. But I just looked up there and I said, who the hell ever heard of this this intersection? And then I just turned around and said, and who the hell ever heard of this? And I named the church. I didn't say it, this is talking to me.
Mhm.
It was perspective,
Yeah.
because everybody in there was like, hang them, right? This was the witch hanging or whatever you call it, the witch.
Right. Right.
And right.
You were Voldemort in there.
Yeah, and I looked and I thought, y'all go ahead and do that, right? There's a bigger world out there.
Mhm.
And I think that's I never forget that. I never want to forget that
Yeah.
because it's so relevant to everything in terms of infinite possibilities. Before that moment, there were no other possibilities, but I looked and thought, it's got to be. This
Gotta
can't
be
be all
something
there
else.
is.
This is not it.
This has got to be something else.
Yeah.
So it's perspective. So when you explain it that way, yeah, I can see that. I can see that.
Yeah.
The-
So
the-
and the pastor there, the minister that night, who was shutting you and your friends down, the intention was that you were not going to be a spiritual leader, you were not going to be a minister, you were not going to lead a congregation, you were not qualified, you couldn't do it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And the word that we would use for that individual today would be wrong. Because he was
I could think of
mistaken.
I could think of some other ones, but go ahead. All right, I'll behave.
Yeah, he was wrong. He was wrong. He was trying to force his own judgment about good or bad, his own duality on you, that you don't belong because of X, Y, or Z, and made you feel bad for a little while. And then you got back at him, and not specifically to get back at him, but doing your own thing, and wound up going far beyond what he would have done.
And here's the other part of that story that makes it even make more sense based on what you said. There were 3 of us, and I'm the only one that said, stick it. I'm out. The other 2 stayed, and they stayed with the the judgment against them and all of that. And every time they saw me, they said, I wish I had the courage you had. And I'm thinking, courage? Save your life. But
I want to stay in a sinking, burning boat because it's
go ahead.
comfortable.
Yeah.
It's where all of my stuff is. It's going to go down.
I never understood it, but they were dear, sweet women.
Mhm.
And I guess I understood where they were coming from. I suppose I was a bit younger, so probably a bit more, rebellious, perhaps. I didn't see it as rebellious. I just saw it as, I'm saving my life. I'm not staying here.
Yep. Can't do any more of this. I've been in similar situations before, either jumping out of the frying pan or being thrown out of the frying pan. And one of those good news, bad news, it's just, where's this in duality? Is it a good thing now that I got thrown out of those particular frying pans? Well, yeah, it didn't feel good at the time, but that is the way that infinite creative process is working. It's not closing the door and stopping everything. A friend of mine says, when one door closes, try the knob. That's the way doors work. So try again. Let's take a break and continue not talking about duality.
Learn to put practical prayer to work in your life. The steps are simple to learn and let you begin to get real results to create the life of your dreams immediately. Reverend Bill Marcione's widely acclaimed book, Practical Prayer for Real Results, gives you a clear summary of the New Thought principles behind practical prayer and the series of easy-to-understand steps found in the most effective prayers from religions and spiritual practices all over the world and throughout history. Practical prayer is not a replacement for your religion or practice. It's a technique to make the work you do in consciousness even more effective. The book includes 40 prayers on various topics that you can adapt as needed and use as your own. Practical Prayer for Real Results is available in paperback, Kindle, and audiobook on Amazon or at b-the-light.com. That's b-the-light.com.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol here with got that mixed up.
I'll be Reverend Dr. Bill Marcioni. There you go.
All right. I'm all into the conversation coming up about, Okay. All right. You want me to do it again?
No. This is casual and homey and fun. And our experience of duality can tell us that we need to do a take two because take one was not good enough. But take one was exactly there's only one. That's what we're going to do. We're going with that.
Okay.
So and we're talking about duality and the judgment that goes along with that. And let's go into why it's so comfortable to describe and experience and explain the world as in terms of duality and to avoid oneness, why people find oneness to be so challenging. And part of it is what I was talking about before, that our senses tell us that there's separation. Mm-hmm. Our senses tell us that things are hot or cold, light or dark, rather than just varying degrees of energy. So as the thermal energy goes up, we go from cold to hot to way too hot. So on fire. I'm not going on fire, but you know what I'm talking about. And that's all of our sensory systems are geared towards telling us that. And on a personal level, we've talked about this before. When we have a duality in the universe, where it's me here and the rest of the world out there, and the rest of the world includes God. Mm-hmm. The divine creative power is somewhere out there separate from me, then my relationship with it changes completely. When I know that God is out there and I want something from God, then I have to bargain with God, ask a favor of God, plead, beg, see if I can figure out how to maneuver God. Well, I know what God wants, so if I do that, maybe I'll get what I want. And when we are in a space of oneness or non-duality, it's an inside job. That one creative power is creating according to my beliefs, and what I have to do is change my own beliefs. If my life is not going the way that I want it to, I get to change my life by changing my beliefs, by changing my internal consciousness, knowing that the world and my life outside will reflect what's in my consciousness. There's a lot of responsibility in that.
Yeah, but it is our responsibility. I use the word work, and I know that's not a favorite word, but it takes work, and it's a good work because it's our work on ourselves. We're the beneficiary of it.
Yeah.
Right. So it's cool. When I go back to that example, and I was running it again as you were talking about God, what made it okay for me was that, okay, there's one God. I believe there is one God. I can't account for how you perceive that one God, because the way it was that person or that group perceived that one God vilified me. It made me, whatever. But that I kept thinking, and I hear myself saying it now, God is not going to leave me like this. God is just not going to let y'all do this to me. Now, I don't know how you explain it, but the God I know is not going to leave me like this. I don't know what the next step is, but I'm going home. I have a good night's sleep, and I'll figure it out, or I'll see it.
Yep.
But we're still talking about that one God. I think I'm right, and they think they're right. Who's right? Who's right? Yes. Yeah.
When we get into a conflict and there's somebody who's trying to diminish somebody else, their idea of using their own leverage to diminish somebody else is right. But it tends to work against them too. Eventually it comes around. So in order to take advantage of somebody, we have to believe that people can be taken advantage of.
Mm-hmm.
And that opens us up to the same thing. And that's why a lot of times people don't want to go there, like with the personal accountability that I'm creating my life experience, because we've done things that are sketchy, and whether we've looked at them or not, that's the stuff that's coming back around, and we're just like hoping and crossing our fingers that it's not going to catch up with us.
That's way too much. Really.
Okay.
That's way too much, because first, we all have done things.
Mm-hmm.
We know we've all done things. Some by accident, some by intention.
Yep.
And, maybe not, rob a bank or shot somebody intention, but we done some things maybe we knew we shouldn't have. And maybe at the time knew we shouldn't have. And I'm looking at it worst case scenario. Okay. So does that mean you're out? No, I don't think so, because there's one God. And I think if God can be agitated by something like my mistake, even if it's intentional, it's a pretty sad, weak God. Now, I don't know if that's the right way to look at it, but that's the way I see it.
Let's go with the example of doing something that's, we'll be gentle and call it non-life affirming, non-uplifting. And even knowing that we're doing it, as opposed to the category of unwittingly doing those things. I mean, I've been doing a lot of work looking back at my childhood, and it's like, wow, did I really do that? And the important part is that I stopped doing that. Whether I remembered doing it at the time and said, I'm going to stop because I don't like doing this. And there have been things, where I changed my life intentionally because I was involved in activities that weren't particularly uplifting. I used to have a job on the radio making fun of people, and I was very funny. I was really good at it. And then it became too painful to use my sense of humor to belittle other people. Mm-hmm. And I was terrified that I wasn't going to be funny anymore. So I figured out a way to be funny without putting people down. I still have a lot of tapes of me on the radio in the 1980s being really mean. And they're not going to go away. But that's not who I am now. I have revised the story and I'm living it differently. And as I move away from that, that has much less resonance in my life now, because that's not what I'm bringing into consciousness at this point. We talk about the law of attraction. That's not what I'm radiating, so that's not what I'm attracting. So we do get to change. We do get to transform. We do get to learn new things and live new ways. Mm-hmm. And we're not limited by the stuff that happened to us. You and your two colleagues that went through the same experience and engaged with it differently, and that puts you on completely different paths.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's a decision that you get to make, and I don't look, or I did not look down on them. I couldn't figure out why you would allow that to happen to yourself, but I can sort of see it from their perspective. They had a lot to lose. Mm-hmm. From their perspective. I'm not sure that I didn't have the same to lose. I just didn't value it the same way. Because listen, this is the only thing I've got here, right? This is all I got. Mm-hmm. I'm responsible for this. Totally responsible for this.
Yep.
And if I make decisions that are not in this best interest, whose fault is that? It's mine. I can't blame anybody for it. So yeah, I looked at, there was a little bit to lose there, but I thought, not as much as this. If I lose, all right, I held back tears long enough to get outside that church. If I lose, there's certain things I lose, might probably have a few more tears. But that's the price that I have to pay, because I have to be responsible for this and everything that has been given to me, or that part of God that is within me. That's my responsibility as a co-creator. So maybe that's a little strong for some people too. There's a story in the Bible, 3 lepers. Leprosy was that horrible disease, and you got kicked out of town if you had it. And they were sitting at the gate, and they were, depending on the benevolence of others for their lives. And they were just there. Like the whole thing is you sit there till you. And so one of them said, why sit we here till we die? I never forget that, because it was like you're kicked out. You have no choice but to sit here and die. And one of them challenged that. Why sit here till we die? If we go back in there, we're going to be dead for sure because they're going to kill us. If we sit here, we'll probably die because nobody cares about us. But if we stretch, if we take a shot, that's what I call it. You take a shot, who knows what will come with another choice? Like I can imagine all kind of things. I don't know if they imagined healing, but I know it was different than sitting here. Something else could happen, could be a more welcoming community. Who knows? But to do nothing, come on.
Limitless possibilities.
Yes. And when I heard that, I go back and think about the faith tradition that I came from did not talk about unlimited possibilities or infinite possibilities. They were all limited.
Yet do what we say and nobody gets hurt.
Yeah, and yet God is big.
Yeah. It's intriguing that you mentioned lepers because I've been teaching this class on how to do healing like Jesus. And the assignment for last week was, because the lepers are all over the Bible. And, the part that was the most interesting is that Jesus was very comfortable hanging around with the lepers and the prostitutes and everybody else. It's all people. And most of the stories seem to be just about how crazy he made everybody else. The people in charge, oh my God, he's hanging around with lepers. How could he do that? So one of the assignments for the class is find out what leprosy is. And other than the laying on of hands of Jesus, is there any other way to treat it? Because it turns out it's called Hansen's disease. There's still about 200,000 cases a year, mostly in Asia and Africa. And there's a 3-drug cocktail. And it goes away. It also takes a lot of doing for somebody to get infected with leprosy or Hansen's disease. It's not like COVID. But that's another bit of perspective that we can have. If you take the lepers and you put them in this context and you say, this is the example of bad, and you put them out of the city and you don't let them in and you fear them and you push them away, it says a lot about the people who were doing the pushing away. Now, there was some self-preservation involved in that, but all the judgment about the people who contracted this disease, that's where the duality comes in. That there's something wrong with them other than the fact that they have Hansen's disease. And it's going to be very uncomfortable for them, and it's contagious if you share their drinking water.
The challenge is to look at it another way. Is there, and I'm sure that people are afraid of their life. You said self-preservation, and it's hard to question that. But there's other things, like being divorced in a fundamentalist church right here, right?
Yep.
I fit all the qualifications of a leper. And you were telling that story and I'm thinking, yeah, they were pushing me out, right?
That's right. They excused you. Yeah, excused you from the congregation.
Listen, you are, I heard these were, you have no value, spiritual value in the kingdom of God ever. Now, there you go, right? And there's a whole host of individuals who make decisions, who are making the decisions, and we agree with that. Whether they did or not, that's what it was. So, yeah, that's duality, right? Because they're looking at it from that perspective. I think for me, in 2025, looking back, I'm saying this is all you got. I
Mm-hmm.
understand your perspective, but there's another one.
Yep.
I get to choose.
Yep.
And yeah, that's
Okay, so-
self-preservation.
Yeah. So in the game of good news, bad news, who can tell? Was it good or bad that you got thrown out of the fundamentalist congregation?
Oh, it's good news that now.
There you go. It's good news now.
Now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what changes. You move over a little and say, oh, that looks completely different from out here. Let's take another break, and then we'll do a prayer that has something to do with oneness. It's Reverend Bill letting you know that the Practical Prayer for Real Results class is now available on demand. That's right, you can take it at your own pace, anytime you want. All of the information is at BeTheLight.com. That's B-the-light.com. You know where to find that stuff. The class is 5 lessons, broken down into 18 modules, and you can take them at whatever pace is comfortable for you. As you work through the process, it starts out with the theory, goes into the practice, there are experiential activities and exercises, and at the end of the program, you will wind up with an understanding of how practical prayer works, and a practical prayer for yourself that will work to create transformation in your life. And as you know, it works for everything. Take a look at the class online at BeTheLight.com. There's a sample lesson so you can see how the class is going to work for you, and then dive in. The great news is it's on sale now. You can register and save $20 off of the regular price. I'm looking forward to seeing you in class.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marcioni.
Fabulous conversation about oneness and duality.
Yeah.
And how the story can change with perspective. Like something happens and we say, well, this is bad because it's going to change my life. It's going to upend everything. And then it turns out later that even though that was an uncomfortable situation, it made way for something new and different. And that happens all the time. Somebody, the relationship breakup, and then that paves the way for a new relationship, for love to be unfolding in the world in a different way. Somebody loses a job, and then they get their dream job. Somebody, whatever, the thing that seems horrible, and something, by the way, that nobody would ever choose for themselves, paves the way for something new and wonderful to happen. I have a friend whose father was killed when she was very young in a plane crash, and it's traumatic for her. And I said, so that plane crash was a big deal. So was there an insurance settlement? She said, oh yeah. Did that change your financial life forever? Well, yeah. It's like you lost Dad, but you got a different life to lead because of it. Would somebody say, oh, I'm giving up Dad so I can have the money? No. Or vice versa. But when you look at the situation, you say, it's not just bad, it's not just good. There is something unfolding here, and there is the possibility for a gift being in everything.
Okay.
I was going to see if you wanted to say anything about that.
No, are we at the prayer part? Because I was thinking, okay.
All right. No, we're going to do the prayer now. We're going to do a prayer, and it's actually going to be even more meditative than the usual prayer that we do, because we're really going to focus in on the first and second steps of the practical prayer. And that is the recognition and unification steps. So the realization and the gratitude are all going to kind of fit in, but mostly towards the end. So as is comfortable to do so, please close your eyes, go within, allow yourself to let loose whatever attachment you have, whatever your 5 senses are telling you about the world around you and about yourself. We'll allow ourselves to detach from that a little bit, and closing our eyes is the first step in doing that. So take a deep breath. Let yourself be completely filled. This breath has never happened before. Now breathe out. Let it go. And that specific combination of molecules that was that breath is never going to happen again. Another deep breath in. Let yourself once again be filled. And with that breath, invite in an even greater awareness of your connection with the universe. And then deep breath out, let it go. And feel yourself settle into your seat, noticing that you are pressing down against your seat, and your seat is pressing up against you. And the force of gravity is holding you right here, in this place at this time. Another breath. Be filled again. Notice that while you were thinking about where you're sitting, you weren't thinking about where that breath is coming from, and it's still there. The goodness and possibility that are required for life are making themselves available in the perfect way. Another deep breath out, let it go. And feel your body relax. Continue breathing. And be aware of yourself in your seat, pressing down, seat pressing up. And understand that there's a floor beneath the seat, and a building beneath the floor, and soil beneath the building, and rock and substance going all the way down to the center of the earth. A column, a line, 4,000 miles long from the center of the earth right up to where you are. And that line continues through where you are, along your spine, touching all of your chakras. And continuing out past your crown chakra, past your head, up and up and up, past the roof, past the sky, past the clouds, past the atmosphere, past space and more space and more space, and keeps going on into the infinite. There is no end. There's no limit to that. Understand where you are on that line between the center of the earth, the surface of the earth, our solar system, the other stars near our solar system, all of the other stars in our local galaxy, all of the other billions of galaxies. As you allow your awareness to expand, understand that it's just a matter of perspective. The greatness, the grandness, the vastness of it. As we open our awareness, we realize that all of the things that we consider to be big or momentous in our lives here on the surface of planet Earth are important, but they're not in control of everything. This is an infinite universe filled with limitless possibilities. And that one power, that one presence, that one love, that one source that creates everything, that shares itself as all of the galaxies, all of the planets, all of the stars, all of the particles, all of the people, everything, that one is the source of everything, and that means that one is the source of me and of each of us. Be aware again of your breathing. You've been doing that while your imagination has been off touring the galaxies. You're still breathing. Still present right here and now. And that's the balance point. We get to experience life on the minutest detail and on the grandest scale, and it's all one. It's all the same. That one infinite creative power, that one divine presence that shares itself as everything, abides within. It is the creative force that has created each of us and all the activities and experiences that we're having. So whatever it is that we describe as good, desirable, uplifting, pleasant, harmonious, prosperous, loving, joyous, fun, creative, vibrant, comfortable, all of what we would describe as good and desirable, we're activating our attractor field to bring that goodness into our lives, to be coherent with the joy and the uplift and the good that we're seeking. And that creative law is responding. It is bringing that good into our lives in new and fresh ways. Not because we earned brownie points and suddenly deserve it from a benevolent force out there, but because of the nature of who and what we are. As we come into alignment with the good that we are seeking, that good unfolds in our lives pressed down and overflowing. And I'm so grateful for it. I'm grateful for the good. I'm grateful for the awareness. And I'm grateful to be able to participate in this creative process and to know that good is unfolding for each of us in our own way, right now and always. And so with a deep feeling of thanks, I speak this word, I let it go, and I know that this is so. And so it is.
The Practical Prayer Podcast with Reverend Bill Marcioni and Carol Lawrence is a production of BeTheLight.com.
be-the-light.com.
Where you can find more information about practical prayer for real results.
Our theme is by Music of Wisdom. You can learn about the spiritual community of New Thought Philadelphia with daily guided meditations,
Weekly celebrations of spirit,
and Reverend Bill's classes in practical spirituality
at newthoughtphilly.org.
This podcast is supported by listeners like you. We're grateful for your tax-deductible donation at newthoughtphilly.org or the link in the episode description.